Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Today, Dr. Suresh Letchmanan, Managing Director, Asia Pacific at Borussia Dortmund, is a wonderful guest on the show. We bring you more Bundesliga-related business initiatives as Suresh and I discuss the brand, the values, and the legacy of the club, Borussia Dortmund's international strategy, and the role the players play on that strategy. And we close it out with career advice, what the future holds, and so much more. I enjoyed this one so much, and I'm pretty sure you're going to do it too. Make sure you stick around. Before going into it though, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice, and share it with your industry colleagues. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, where every week we send updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find the link in the show notes. Remember, 2024 is going to be a busy one. We have events in London, Mexico, Sevilla. Hopefully, we'll meet you there. So check it all out on our website. Now, let's welcome Dr. Suresh Letchmanan to the show. Well, Suresh, welcome to the World Football Summit podcast. It's such a great time to have you here, looking at all the success you guys are collecting throughout Europe, let's say. I've always been a fan of the club, so this is just such a great opportunity. So yes, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jamie, and thank you, World Football Summit, for having me on your show.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun. But before going into the different topics we're going to talk about, I was wondering if you could briefly introduce yourself to the audience. And, I always like to ask my guests, why is it that you do what you do?
Sure. Hi. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Suresh Letchmanan. I'm the Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Borussia Dortmund. I've been in the club with the club for the last 10 years. Ever since I was a little child, I've always dreamt of being involved in football, right? So, and you always wanted to go on the pitch. And, we have so many great heroes growing up watching on television. And I always wanted to play football professionally. I mean, my grandfather was a professional footballer. My uncle was a professional footballer. And that sort of rubbed into my desire and my dreams of being a footballer. Unfortunately, I wasn't at that level, but I only played at a semi-professional level, which was okay. But then at some stage, I got acquainted back to football, and I have been in management ever since. And as they say, the rest was history.
Amazing. And you just been announced, correct me if I'm mistaken here, but I think the Asia Pacific Business Leader Award from the club. And this basically recognizes outstanding performance, dedication to business and the industries in the region, in the Asia Pacific region. So I guess this is a good opportunity to understand your exact role at the club.
Sure. And again, I'm extremely humbled and honored to receive the award from the Asia Pacific Business Organization. I mean, this was through with all the top, really, really top brands that are part of this organization. You have brands like Adidas, Coca-Cola, LG, Fuji, and it's really humbling for me to be associated with such big brands. And as the head of Asia, my role is to spread black and yellow hearts to the footballing community in the region, which includes promoting the club, taking them on tours, setting up academies, procuring new businesses, pushing merchandise sales, media exposure for the club, and most importantly, to expand the fan base. Just to name a few roles that I play at the club.
Amazing. And one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you to the show, Suresh, is to talk about the importance of going international. You see a lot of I mean, I wouldn't even call it a trend. It's kind of like a necessity now, no?
Yeah.
So I was wondering why is it important for football clubs today to develop an international strategy?
Are extremely important. I mean, the global presence of European and international football in Asia is incredible these days, and you can, however, take many positives from embarking into the international markets. You know, building a bigger fan base, creating an international fan culture is so important to drive many opportunities for the club, such as tours, merchandise, sponsorships, digital and social media reach, etc. Working closely with the Bundesliga, for example, and this is such an important aspect for us that we keep the competition within the European leagues, as you know, with the other top leagues are also garnering reach in Asia. And it's important to be part of that strategy to raise visibility of German football, exporting our youth development programs, for example. So these are things that are relatively important for us when you think about international. And you don't get any bigger than having the team in these markets when you go on preseason and postseason tours. So it's unreal to see the level of excitement and energies whenever you see European teams and clubs coming into the Asian region.
They're hugely passionate. That's true, no? In that regard, I mean, it's just amazing. Not only any club, really. It's just you see it across the entire spectrum, no?
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, and you were mentioning, of course, the importance for the Bundesliga as a whole, no? But specifically, for Borussia, I don't know if you can outline a little bit or go into detail on how they are rolling out the international strategy, specifically in the region that you work on.
Yeah, as I said before, the club needs to be present in the markets. It's so important that the fans, our partners, our key stakeholders that are part of our international strategy are far away from the club, right? So we are 10, 12,000 miles away from Germany, and not many of us have the chance to travel to Germany to be close to our club. So we tend to do this a little bit more, to bring, like as I mentioned, on tours, having legends, especially former players coming onto the markets. It is never easy to bring our first team players during season. So we are fortunate enough to have former players like Karl-Heinz Riedler, you know, we have Jörg Heinrich, you know, Lars Ricken, Roman Weidenfeller. So former players that have played at the highest level. And this is the opportunity for us to bring that close relationship with our stakeholders. These are touch points that are important to build and grow your reach in Asia. And I wouldn't just limit it to Asia, but also internationally in markets like in the US, in Africa, you know, in Australasia, for example. And it's one part, and this is just one part of the international strategy. Obviously, there's many different aspects of it, but being closed, and this is something I feel that, you know, whenever you go on tours, you see some European teams coming in, they do their stuff, they leave, but you want to spend more time on ground. You want to be close. You want to increase your, and especially for players, they want to get their IG likes and increase their IG post and base. So there are things that are relatively important for the players and alike. But for a club, this is important for us because we're, you know, Dortmund. It's a people's club. You know, we don't build things artificially. Everything we do comes from our hearts. So and the players understand this, and whenever they come on ground, we want to increase and reach a bigger fan pool than our European teams that come to Asia.
To your point, I once heard the same idea or the same concept from
Yeah.
Javier Tebas, president La Liga, at
Yeah.
one of our events. No, he was saying, you know, when you build a league, yeah, you need quality players, you need quality
Yeah.
teams. That's all good, but at the end of the day, you need to be close to your fans. You need to be close
Yeah.
to your partners, and the only way to do that is to be present in those markets. Why? Because the fan they want to be as close as they can to the game. If for them it's only like a distant
Yeah.
reality, if you will, they're not going to be
Yeah.
as engaged, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's you know it's interesting to see how different leagues, clubs. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's all the same ideas and the same concepts, no?
100%.
And I'm wondering, Suresh, I mean, is there any within the region, no, any particular markets that stand out for Borussia Dortmund?
Yeah, for the APAC region, we have clearly defined some key markets. We also coincide this with our close association with the Bundesliga, for example, to ensure bigger presence, especially with the likes of broadcasts and reach. It's so important to have these games shown and seen on some of these Asian countries. So markets like Indonesia, for example, China, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan are what we classify as Category A markets. Um, and as the appetite for football and the investment into football is larger from our perspective. Of course, there are the other markets, like your Laos, Cambodia, um, some of the Myanmar, and some of the other markets where it's football is still relatively popular. But in terms, we need to obviously prioritize markets where we can obviously engage with them, and we can also collect impressions, and also grow potential business opportunities as we go along. So those markets that I've mentioned, especially the likes of Korea, Japan, for example, we had players that has graced the black and yellow colors before. Kagawa, Shinji,
Very well.
for Japan. We had Lee Young-pyo for Korea. We had Ji. We had Park. We had quite a few players that have played for us from these markets. And the concept of really trying to get top Asian players at some stage to come to Germany and come to Dortmund, for example, to play is still a very, very huge appetite for a lot of these aspiring young players coming from these markets. So we know, I mean, again, if you were to look at China and India, for example, two of the most, one of the two in terms of population in these two countries, including Indonesia, these are countries that you feel will have a lot more interest with a club like us because we are accessible, you know, and that's why we do a lot more on the ground, especially when we have games, matches, tours, legend games, youth tournaments. We engage a lot on the ground, and we do sometimes see young aspiring players coming from those programs, and we try to bring them over to Germany, provide them for a couple of weeks in Dortmund. If they're good enough, they stay longer. We might even look into other opportunities for them to continue developing their footballing career. So there are pathways that we do look into, especially markets that we feel are relatively important for us.
Yeah, it was funny because I was listening to Pierre Norbert, no? The CMO at Bundesliga International.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realized, but the number of players, not only Borussia Dortmund, but in general, the Bundesliga welcomes from the Asia Pacific region is amazing. And in a way, because even if you think about it, we're saying that even from a cultural perspective, it seems not, but they're very similar. Which actually kind of leads me to my next question, which is, okay, we talk about Asia, but Asia is huge. So there's so many cultures, so many different customs. How important is understanding and how big of a challenge is understanding each local customs, cultures for the club? How important is that?
It's massive. It's 100%. It's completely huge. It's magnanimous. Cultural understanding, local customs, and ethics are primary importance when working in the Asian markets. We cannot cut and paste what we have adopted in Europe, for example, and into Asia. It doesn't work. Or even certain markets in Asia, we cannot cut and paste these practices into the other markets. It has its own quality. It has its own style. It has its own appeal. It has its own approach. So for example, what we develop and practice in Japan cannot be replicated in Indonesia, for example. And we need to be able to customize individual need for the partner in each market to get the best result for everyone. So we can so what we tend to do is keep our principles. Our principles will never change because that's part of our DNA. But we need to be creative to ensure that the product fits to the particular market with its cultural environment. I know it gets a little technical there, but in terms of language, in terms of cultural practices, we did an event for example, in Indonesia, and coming into an Indonesian city. This was just outside of Jakarta in Bandung, and we tend to do what we practice while seeing the Indonesians. We put our hands together, we bow, we greet them in the same language. We're trying to dress a little bit more towards the Indonesian culture. So they then feel, wow, you've taken the effort to really embrace our culture, and bring football into the equation, and that's something we tend to do a little bit more whenever we travel into Asia. We do understand certain practices that are in place. There's always the element of food involved, for example, how we and it's that's how the beautiful game evolves, right? When there's football, we find ways to get and bring different cultures and practices together. And you need to really, really go on ground. And I said this to everyone. I mean, I've been in management for so many years, but me as a manager as well, sometimes you need to bring yourself down to the root of these people to embrace them. And that goes a long way because that buys in a lot for you to garner that relationship and success in those markets.
Mm-hmm. I once read a book called Football Against the Enemy that was saying how important football was to shaping culture.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how culture shapes football. And I think this is a good example of it, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of like a bidirectional relationship, if you will.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me, okay, we were talking about before how important it is to be close to the fan, which is where you see the importance of tours for the club, right? But if we go a little bit deeper, what are the main objectives that the club pursues when, when you guys do tours through the region?
So firstly, it's important that we do tours internationally because as we spoke earlier on, without being close to our fans, we aren't able to build that relationship. So tours it's important, and it's to be very fair and honest with you. This club is about our fans, right? We can have anything and everything. Just think about the 82,000 people that come to our stadium every fortnight. Think about the number of fans that are glued to the TV every other week, and this is goes to fans from all around the world. And again, not many people could afford to fly to Germany, as I mentioned to you, to watch a game. Hence, coming on ground to be close to them is very, very important. Secondly, our partners, right? Fans priority. Our partners are also important because they have also invested into the football club. So we have our partners like Evonik, Puma, some of the big brands that have been involved with us. They've also invested a lot into being part of the club. They pay good money for the association. Hence, we need to ensure that they also receive that global audience outside of Germany, for example, so that they are also present in some of these other markets. The league, the Bundesliga is obviously, and I've been mentioning a lot. There are different relationships in different clubs and leagues, but for the German league, the clubs and the league are relatively close. So we tend to work hand in hand with the league and the clubs, and we need to have we are the assets for the league, but they need to have that presence because we need the visibility of the games, for example. So there should be some form of financial commitment provided to broadcasters to telecast matches each week, and having the team on ground do provide that support mechanism to the broadcasters. So, for example, when we are planning on doing tours in Asia, the broadcasters that have been involved globally or internationally in that sense get a chance to have a one-on-one with the players. They had a chance to broadcast that match, for example, I don't know, against a local team or against a European team. So that relationship is very, very important. Of course, the next aspect that you need to think about is merchandise. How do we get merchandise out? It's never easy. There are markets where we don't even have Dortmund shirts. Where do we get them? Of course, you know how it is in Asia. There's always a knockoff jersey somewhere in the night markets. But at the end of the day, you need to be popular in order for someone to copy you. But at the end of the day, you still need to find a way how we provide opportunities for our fans, for people to have access to our merchandise. And it's never easy. So we work closely with Puma, for example, to get merchandise available for our fans. Increase social media and digital reach. You know how we live in a technological world these days, right? Everything and anything we do has to be digitally enhanced and ensure that we are able to reach our audiences, not on ground, but also digitally. And what's also important for us is to do, our academies, our camps, our clinics, to add to the overall presence of our team. So when we are on tours, these are things that we have to do. That's part of the overall Dortmund ecosystem, as I call it.
I was just going to say that very same word, gathering the entire ecosystem or mini ecosystems across different regions, right? It's
Yeah,
just not the fans.
exactly.
It's everybody has some form of relationship with the club, right?
Exactly.
Any type of stake.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about the success of these tours, I mean, you talked about digital engagement now and
Yeah.
reach, which I guess is part of the equation. Are there any, I don't know if it's metrics or elements, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
that you focus on to say, hey, this was a successful tour or not?
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, I think when we do any tour, as fans, as players, as management, you walk into a stadium and you ensure that the stadium is full, or at least full. That shows how much people would have, made the effort to come and watch you live in a stadium. So we hope to get maximum capacity at the stadium. Again, digital and social media reach is important, especially when we're on ground. The amount of engagements that we get with players, the amount of engagements we get with our fans, with the media, that's extremely important for us because that justifies the presence of the club. Of course, sound revenues. We want to ensure that we are able to also bring in new partners or even extend partnerships. As we go on ground, it's always good to have local brands coming in to support you. And there are stages where relationship ends, but there are time where we have new partners coming on board. But we tend to want to also renew those relationships if partners have been with us for a period of time, because we don't like short-term relationships. We always look at mid to long-term relationships. And that's very, very important for them to be part of our black and yellow family. And also the performance of the team. So we want to make sure that the team go there and not there for a holiday, right? So they need to ensure that they perform to the highest level. I think the coach's assessment on putting a team on the pitch is also important. Of course, there are times that you give some of your younger players a run, but the fans these days, the media, everybody that have paid good money to watch the game, you want to see your top players appearing and playing the game, and that's for us very, very important for us because it shows our commitment, and it shows the respect that the team has when they travel into these markets. And that comes down to the positive media outlook. So after the game, how does the media perceives about the club? Where did they go? How did they culturally engage? What else did they do when they're on tour? Any corporate social responsibility activities? Anything that they've done with charity? So those are little things that really embark into an overall success. But there's two things to highlight. Obviously, happy fans, happy partners, happy media.
Happy everyone, no? But I mean, to your point, I'm just remembering, I mean, at the end of the day, for these fans, it's a unique opportunity to watch, probably, if you think about it, probably once in a lifetime.
Sure.
And then you see the example of other clubs, and I don't want to criticize anybody, but just the controversy that arose from when Inter Miami went to Hong Kong and Messi couldn't play because he was injured.
Yeah.
And fans were mad at the end of the day. So because for them, it was, they paid top dollar. It's a unique opportunity to watch Messi play in an Inter Miami shirt. So, I mean, I guess you get that from their perspective, no? I guess to your, and thank you for this great overview. I'm just thinking, at the end of the day, Borussia Dortmund has a very powerful brand. It's very recognizable, and there's some elements of it that are just unique. So and the legacy, the different. There's legendary players that have been at the club. You've won the most important championships all over the place. How does that, or how does the club leverage from that legacy, from that powerful brand that it has, to maximize these international tours or the international strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you were to look at Dortmund, I mean, you're a fan. What is the first thing that comes to you when you think about Dortmund? One is the color. the black and yellow color has resonated tremendously within the European and international footballing arena. The stadium, we've got the one of the most uh, largest attendance in global football with close to 81,000, 82,000 on a match day. We've got this only standing terrace in global football called the Yellow Wall, that we try to export that vision into our international reach. So when you think about all these aspects of Dortmund, it brings a little shine to a fan. The other aspect of Dortmund that I say would probably bring that brand and the legacy into the international arena is also its polarization. If you were to go out there, and then you're based here in Spain, and if you were to go out there in any on the streets of Spain and speak to anyone about Borussia Dortmund, I can guarantee you no one says, "Yeah, that's not a good club." They will say, "Wow, that club, wow, they've brought so many successes into their players how many players have become successful out from the team." Not to mention a certain individual right now playing for Real Madrid, for example. I mean, just won the Laureus Award again. Can think of first ever footballer to win a Laureus Award.
Hmm.
So, and if you were to look at where he was 2, 3 years ago, he was just a young teenager coming out from Birmingham and going to a club for the first time at 16 years old, and in 3 years' time winning the Laureus Award and going into a Champions League semi-final. It shows exactly how Dortmund has built characters into the club. How young players were given that chance. Not many clubs do give young players a chance. We had Christian Pulisic, we had Jadon Sancho, right? We had Nuri Sahin, who also
Hmm.
played for Real Madrid and also for Liverpool. We had Mario Götze. We had Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Ousmane Dembele. We had so many young top players. Ilkay Gundogan. We had
Isaac, Haaland. I mean, the
yeah,
list is endless.
exactly. The list is endless. So when you sit down and think how we as a club has brought young aspiring players to a pinnacle of their career, this is Borussia Dortmund. So we always find this way to justify talents that we have grown. Now in our club these days, we have players like Karim Adeyemi, we have Jamie Bino Gittins, so we have young players that are slowly coming into this. We have Donny Marlin,
Mhm.
so these players are slowly coming into, obviously they need time. Young players obviously need time to develop, but they need that platform for them to perform. So Dortmund gives them that platform to perform. So we are extremely proud to see, and we've got this pride in us that we have seen so many young, talented players that have gone through our youth system, and there's something right that our system is doing, right? There's something right
Mhm.
about what we're doing. And that's why we feel extremely connected. And as you mentioned about how this brand and legacy evolves internationally. And this is how our youth programs have always been a very, very successful story to share with the rest of the world.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it's just so many touch points that you guys have. No? So you have obviously a kid is unique.
Yeah.
When you see matches on TV and you see the the stadium, everybody just being so passionate, supporting the team,
Yeah.
just a unique environment. Then you see, as you said, all these players that are coming, they're young, but then, they break through. The
Yeah.
list is endless. I mean, it's just so different, so many different elements. No? And I guess I'm wondering, okay, I get that from my club perspective, but at the end of the day, this is about connecting with fans.
Sure,
So
100%. And if you were to
how?
ask, players or any our fans these days, we have two significant players right now. I mean, who have been with the club for almost over 10 years: Marco Reus and Mats Hummels, right?
Yes,
And,
legends.
and these two, I mean, of course, for Mats Hummels, he went to Bayern for a while, and then he came back to Dortmund. And just to think of the service that they have provided, especially for a player like Marco Reus, he could have gone to a bigger club,
Mhm.
a popular club, in
Sure.
Europe. But he's stayed. He's worked hard. He's made a legacy of a name for himself. And whenever we go on tour in Asia, in all due respect to some of the other players that we have, it's always Marco Reus that everyone
Yeah.
wants to be associated with. So we are quite fortunate, and we are actually extremely blessed to have him still with the club. But at the same time, it's never easy to compete at that level for the last 10 to 15 years. So you need to be at optimum level. Not everyone's Cristiano Ronaldo, but at some stage, Marco Reus has this pedigree in him, and he has this quality in him that we always feel he's able to deliver, and that rubs on a lot more to the fan base that we have internationally.
But at the end of the day, they're like Royce. He represents values.
Yeah.
I think in today's world, fans they want to connect with values, with authentic values, right? And players like him, and there's many other examples, no, through history, but players like him represent something. Okay, if you're a follower of the club, you identify with a set of values, and then that player is kind of like the representation of those values you resonate with, right? So it's all tied together. So at the end of the day, I was going to ask about this later on because I understand how you're using a player like Reuters or like Hummels in your international marketing strategies because it's a matter of just personifying, if you will, the values of the club into players. No, what about the international players? I mean, are they key to opening up new markets, or is it enough with having players like Royce, like Hummels, to open up new markets?
I think based. I mean, you've actually shared most of the points already, but first and foremost, before even thinking about the players per se, we need to look at the club. So we, as you mentioned, we are authentic. So authenticity is important. Ambitious. We need to be ambitious. We have the adrenaline. We have the bonding force. Whether it's win, lose, or draw, that's embedded into the players when they go in. Whenever everyone walks into the stadium, 82,000 people screaming, shouting, even win, lose, or draw. There was a season where we were bottom of the league in 2015. The fans were singing, 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 singing nonstop. Last season, we lost the championship to Bayern by 1 point when we drew in Mainz, and that was heartbreaking for us. I was at the stadium, but the fans stayed. Everyone stayed in the stadium. They kept singing. They kept singing. They started to lift the players up again. And this is something is embedded into the culture of Borussia Dortmund. And whenever anyone steps onto that pitch, they have this into their DNA. And it also helps when when these players go into the international arena. So we, of course, as you mentioned, tend to choose players that also justifies the values that the club possesses. So Royce Götze, Mario Götze was with us. He won the 2014 World Cup for Germany, but prior to that, he was part of our Dortmund team. So Hummels. We had players like look at Jadon Sancho. He chose to come back to Dortmund, knowing that it was a big struggle for him to continue to build in Man United. He learned his lessons in terms of what it was like in Man United. But when you come back to Dortmund, you have to fight and ensure that there's certain qualities and values that you upkeep in Dortmund. So look that he's getting his confidence back. He's willing to play at that highest level. So these are things that are really, really important to have them into our marketing strategy. Bellingham, for example, such a classic guy, and open heart, with such an open mindset, with big heart. So these individuals that I've mentioned are very, very much part of the program and structure that makes this club very special.
And then how do you use these? I don't know if you can give examples of different activations that you do with these players to connect with those fans and to generate new fans around the world. Is there anything you can share there, or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first is as I mentioned again, and as I mentioned before, and I will mention again, the club always put our fans as priority because, as I mentioned, without the fans, there's no football club. Humility is important. You look at the city in Dortmund. We are a working class environment, a working class city. It's we don't have big skyscrapers or big tall buildings like a typical city in, like, for example, in Munich or in London, for example. So everything it's all seen around the vicinity of the club. So even if you go to into our changing rooms, and I strongly encourage at some stage that you come into Dortmund and experience this. Our changing rooms are the same for years. We keep it at the minimum because the football is the sexy football or the beautiful game is on the pitch, not in the changing room. So we tend to keep this at a very basic level so that people tend to go there only for the purpose of changing and going onto the pitch. So these are things that we keep things at a very minimum. It's about football and the love of our club. There's a saying in German called echte Liebe, which is real love or true love. So anything and everything we do, it's about the love of the club. And our stadium colors, our values that we keep are adopted, and these values are then shared to everyone, right? So we adopt the values, we share these values, not just to the players, to the fans, to the employees, to anyone that is associated to the club. These values are then still managed and maintained to them. So when they talk about Borussia Dortmund, we have this in their mind. We send these messages out so that new fans also know what and who BVB are. That's important for us.
Okay. And in terms of balancing the role of the local fan and the international fan, how do you do that? And I'm only asking because I once heard Peter Moore in an interview, former
Yeah,
CEO at Liverpool.
yeah,
He was saying that during his time at the club, it was the international fan, the one that drove higher LTV, the lifetime value. No, so how do you balance that at Borussia Dortmund? Because you're a local club with a strong community, but you're
yeah.
also trying to grow the brand internationally. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we do a lot international with our international fans. We have I can't remember the exact number, but I know I don't want to provide you with the wrong number, but we do have a sizable amount of fan clubs internationally, and we are extremely surprised that the number of fan clubs are growing religiously in the next every other year. Again, as I mentioned before, customizing language into local language on our channels is important. Engagement on digital and social media is always a must. We organize viewing parties. So, for example, when we do having games against Bayern Munich or top teams, of course, sometimes the kickoff times can be a challenge because it's like 1, 2 in the morning here in Asia. But I can honestly tell you, the last game we played against Bayern Munich, when we played away, the kickoff time was like 2:30 in the morning, but we still had about close to 80 to 90 fans in a bar in Bangkok, for example. So
well,
there are dedicated people that would still be part of our fans. We also tend to do a fan club event. So every year we call it the fan gathering, international fan gathering. So we invite close to 50 different fan clubs around the world, and then the last one we had it in Bangkok, and everyone gets engaged together. We share philosophies, we share ideas, we share we network together. We also share certain aspects of how the fans, international fans, would like to engage with the club. And to top it off, we always bring a legend down or former player down to be part of that whole experience. So that is also important. And twice or 3 times a year, we invite all the fan clubs to come to Dortmund,
oh,
where
nice. Okay.
they get a chance to also meet the first team players. They get a chance to have an autograph session, a meet and greet, a chance to communicate and engage with our first team players and our management and our legends. They get a chance to play, football. They get a chance to play PlayStation and whatever. So there are things that we do a lot with our international fans and local fans as well. So these are things that we tend to do a lot more for us because we need the fans. We want to be close to the fans, and wherever we go, and I can honestly tell you, even on away games, we still have international fans traveling all around the world to go for away games as well. So it just shows how much the club has come from 15, 20 years ago to where they are these days, and to where they are right now. And these days, you could see a lot more international flavor and color when you see international fans coming to the stadium, either home games or away games.
But that's the difference between a fan and a customer at the end of the day, no? Fan
Yeah.
is there to do sometimes things that you can't really explain. Like, for example,
Oh, oh,
staying up until 1 or 2 in the morning to watch a game, traveling
yeah,
all over the world just to go to Dortmund and meet the players. But at the end of the day, that's what they want. They want to be as close to the game as possible. It's another example, no?
exactly.
So
Exactly.
so that's interesting. And I guess I'm wondering, speaking about reaching new fans, connecting with new fans, and what cannot avoid the fact that now women's football is becoming a reality, first of all, finally, but also a way to actually tap into new segments. So how is Borussia Dortmund kind of like benefiting from that wave of, the rise of women's football to actually tap into new segments, new cohorts, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been very positive development for our women's team, and also the rise of women's football generally. As you can see, the last World Cup was played in Australia, and you can see the viewership for women's football has increased tremendously. The participation level of women's football has increased tremendously. We, as a club, in the last 4 years or 5 years, we have set up a women's team, and we started at the lowest level. I mean, we could have paid and just gone up straight to the first level, but that's not how Dortmund do it. We've always done it from this is why we are authentic, we are rooted, and that's why we start from the lower level all the way up to, I think now we have got promoted to the fourth division. There's a huge growth in our fan base following our women's team setup. As I said 4 years ago, we also see a lot of women fans, a lot of ladies, girls, families coming to watch the women's game. We are confident that the growth will be more and more each season as our women's team continue to compete towards promotion. And I think at the end of the day, you want to see the women's team progress right to the top level, the same as the men's. So, but it is taking the footballing world by storm these days. You see really really top talented girls coming through, even from schools, through colleges, through programs where they are embarking a career into football. So the women's game has risen completely. It's never been seen at that level 10 years ago. So I mean, looking at where some of these young top girls playing, for example, looking at some. I mean, I'm here based in Australia, and the biggest name that we have here is Sam Kerr,
Yes.
who who plays here. I mean, she's from Western Australia in Perth, and now playing for one of the biggest clubs in Europe, especially in the UK with Chelsea. But there is a name that has been there's a training ground that's named after her. So you can see the women's game has completely changed from where it was years ago.
Speaking of Australia, look at what happened after the World Cup.
Yeah,
In Australia, just this past summer, no
yeah,
record attendance, record
yeah,
sponsorship, and
100%.
yeah, at the end of the day, it's a reality. And what's interesting, some dynamics that I've seen, around the women's game is, first of all, the players. It seems they're much more approachable when it comes to different activations, sponsorship, and all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Second, from a fan perspective, it does seem like it's call it a entertainment option that includes the entire family.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure,
So that
100%.
changes the dynamics a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you look at the final game, right? When you saw England play Spain, right? I mean, the manner in which the game was set up, the manner in which you could see how the stadium was filled, the lead up to the game, post game, it is at the highest level, because what we don't understand or what we don't experience 10 years ago is this rise in the quality of football as well, and to give some form of level playing ground with the men's game. Yeah, it's still some work to be done in terms of the opportunities for the women's game at that level. But looking at the last World Cup or the recent World Cup, how the women's game has evolved, from broadcast, the number of cameras, the number of sponsors, and just filling a full stadium, it's unheard of. And that's why I think there will be a lot more to look into, to consider when we look into the women's game in the future.
And I guess I'm wondering, okay, so we talked about the international fan, the local fan, the importance of women's football. I think there's one other element that we haven't covered yet, which is the youth. But I think I'm going to talk about really how about different, because you were mentioning how there's a lot of talent that has been going from the Asian region to the club. And
Yeah,
that in a way is kind of like a perfect story to tell to reach new fans. Meaning, when you see, if you call it the hero's journey, someone who
yeah,
comes from Japan like Kagawa,
yeah,
he goes into
yeah,
the club and he succeeds at that level. No,
yeah,
obviously, if you have someone coming in from the youth ranks and
yeah,
reaching the top of the club, that's just like the ultimate, story.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
what initiatives, what programs are you guys carrying out in the region to, let's say, nurture that local talent?
Yeah. So we have in the last, I would say in the last 10 years, we have close to I mean we have 14 different Asian markets that we have conducted various youth development programs, ranging from camps to clinics to club corporations to academies to grassroots initiatives. So that's all obviously part of our, in line with our international strategy. As you know, the core DNA of our club, it's is on our youth development philosophies and structures. We have a player right now. Probably he's not at his best right now. His name is Yusufa Mokoko, and Yusufa Mokoko, for us, is one of the most amazing story to share because of his, I mean, of his age, his tender age. When he was 16 already, he's the youngest Bundesliga scorer in the history of the league, and the youngest Champions League scorer in the history of the Champions League. So, and he's part of our academy. He started at a very young age and was brought up through our youth DNA and our youth philosophies, and we try to export those stories and those programs into Asia. And we had the chance, and a couple of talented boys. We have one talented girl who's currently right now who's 18 years old, which we brought to from Singapore to Dortmund. She's now playing in the first team in Dortmund,
Yeah, wow.
and she's if I'm not wrong, the fourth top scorer or fifth top scorer in the league. So that's a success story if you were to look at a very young Asian prodigy that comes through the system and end up playing at the highest level. We had a couple of boys from Australia. We had a couple of boys from Thailand, but that was pre-COVID. But unfortunately, we were unable to fulfill those fulfill those programs because of COVID. So 2 years, and in football, if you lose 2 years to be in that training program, then you lose out completely. So we are going back to the drawing board right now to look into markets. We work very closely with the Bundesliga. The Bundesliga has this thing called the Bundesliga Dream.
Hmm.
We work very closely with them to also identify young, aspiring talents. And we know, especially in markets like Japan, Korea, China, there are some Southeast Asian markets that are good. Australia, for example. So we do spend a little bit more time to look into talented boys and girls, especially as well, that could come through the programs that we have. And these programs are all Dortmund programs. It's our own coaches. It's our own academy coaches that are on ground, that work very closely with the local schools, with the local colleges, with the local clubs in order to identify some of these talents. And hopefully, and we don't promise, and we will never promise that they will end up playing for Dortmund, but we know they could reach at a certain level to at
Hmm.
least play in Europe or even the Bundesliga.
But it does make sense that you're implementing your own methodology in different parts of the world at the end of the day, no? Because it's like any business out there, the
Yeah,
processes, the culture, you need everybody to really follow it. And not, the only way to do that is to actually implement it as soon as possible. No?
yeah,
And,
100%.
and obviously, as we were saying before, if you actually get someone, like the girl you were mentioning from Singapore, being
Yeah,
able to escalate those ranks and then reaching at the top of, the women's team, that creates a lot of fans in those international markets,
yeah.
generating new business opportunities. At the end of the day, it's all tied
True.
together.
And you mentioned, Jimmy, it's a ripple effect. It's a domino effect because as
Hmm.
soon as we see this, one thing comes after, and You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It creates it creates a little bit of euphoria, a little bit of an understanding within the community that there's something new that's brewing. You know what I mean?
There you go.
So that's something we try our level best, and it's never easy for Asian players, and especially with climate, with food, with with many different challenges that Asian people do face when going to Europe. But I think these days the Asian boys and girls are a little bit more stronger mentally and physically. They have access, obviously, to social media to know what these things are and how to get at that level. Yeah, we are hoping at some stage we'll see the next top Asian player coming to Dortmund.
Hopefully. And because at the end of the day, it builds, going back to what we were mentioning before, the ecosystems within, within the region. And I guess Sudesh, I'm wondering, at the end of the day, we're talking about business. And you're competing in, with other clubs from Germany, with other clubs internationally for fans' attention. But not only that, probably with other forms of entertainment now, because it's not just, now people can either watch Netflix or they can watch a game, right?
Yeah.
So how does a club like Borussia Dortmund maintain that competitiveness versus either other clubs or other forms of entertainment in international markets?
Funny you mentioned this. I mean, we talk about competition. To be absolutely honest with you, and then we've been our international strategy has been in place for the last 10 years. We actually don't compete with anyone. We run our own race.
Okay.
And that's exactly how Dortmund has been in that position, ever since. So the whole process is about being present on the ground, as you know, maintaining our engagements online regularly. And why do we need to compete? I mean, the other teams, the other clubs have their expectations and their objectives. We have our expectations and objectives. The competition can stay on the pitch, but the competition for us off the pitch is based on our own way, um, um, our own processes that we put in place. So, and I'm extremely comfortable with what we have done, and I'm very proud of what we have done in the last 10 years. If you could see, there are many international, there are many clubs that have gone international. Some have withdrawn their stay, or they have in Asia, but we've never had that pressure of competing. We've always taken the sportive and the football climate very closely to our hearts, but at the same time, we set out different objectives to meet whenever whenever a season starts, for example. So things like, if we do a tour, or is a tour ready for this year, or do we go to the US, for example? What are the other alternatives if we should do in the event that there's no Asia tour, for example? So, for example, I give you Jamie and I a classic example. When we were having COVID, it was a good 2.5 years that we were unable to do anything, but we transformed and we tried to get things done digitally. So we engage everything digitally. We did a virtual tour. So anything and everything we do as if the team was going on a tour, but it was done virtually. So we tend to be a little creative in that sense. So there were organizations, clubs that were not able to do anything, but we have to think outside of the box and see how we could still continue to build this momentum as if there was no COVID. So these are ideas that we come up with. So like virtual tours, digital engagement. So that time when we were having COVID, that was one of the best time that we increased our fan base, to be very honest with you, because the digital world that we had was able to provide us with that opportunity. So yeah, to just answer your question, yeah, no competition. We just compete ourselves with ourselves.
You should say, I understand now why the club is giving you the Asia Pacific Business Leader Award. That was an awesome answer, to be honest. No, but I appreciate that, because if you look at business in general, biggest businesses around in history, they always have a race against themselves, which is basically what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just about engaging with the fans. Not
right. Correct.
dealing with others, no? So I appreciate
Yeah.
that. So thanks so much. And I think it's a good segue too, because I want to be respectful of your time and you have a few minutes left to this. But
Yeah.
speaking about that, I mean, a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are actually aspiring sports industry professionals. So I'm wondering if you could just close it off with some advice that you would give anybody looking to either work in international market strategy or whatever you want to call it, or even just have a career in football. I don't know if you want to give any specific advice. I don't know if you want to talk about any skills that you should work on. I mean, whatever comes to mind.
That question has been raised many times, and I think, to be very honest, it's working in this, and then probably Jimmy, you would probably agree on me. It's never easy. I mean, everyone thinks it's a bit of roses, working for a football club. You get a chance to mingle around with all these top talents. You go for matches. Great. That's part of these are perks of the game. Perks of the job. That's fine, but it's never a 9 to 5. I can guarantee you, it's never a 9 to 5. You work on weekends. You work on holidays. It's a dream. It's a dream job. You need to be driven. You need to be resilient. There are days where you have long hours. As I mentioned, you have to be multi-skilled. So you can't just say, I mean, even for me as a manager, I roll my sleeves sometimes. I go on ground. I help especially on tours. I ensure that the water sprinklers are switched on for my players to train so that the pitch is nice and wet. So you can't just sit down with the hands full like that and expect someone else to do. You need to take ownership of your job, of your responsibility. So that's something that you have to think about. It's not a job. It's something that you have to love what you do. And some people say it's for me, Elisa. It's my hobby. I love football. So there's never a dull day where I would say, yeah, I only work to do this, and these other jobs are not my responsibility. Sometimes you've got to think like everyone and anyone. So that's probably something I would give to the audience whenever, if you think of working in football, it's not just being a digital marketeer or to be a operations manager. It's bits of everything. Of course, there are days where it gets really, really, really monotonous. It gets really, really tired, busy, stressful. You need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to breathe football. It's 24/7. Know the latest sporting news, be in the commercial and sporting environment to know what transaction has been going on in terms of player movements, in terms of new partners coming in, new sponsors coming in. Be current with the latest trends in sports, and at the same time, you need to create a network for yourself. That's the most important thing in how I would probably do my giveaway to the audience.
I was actually thinking of what I could add to that, but you just covered it all and you answered that perfectly. At the end of the day, Suresh, thank you for that, because I fully agree. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it does have its perks, but it's also, it's challenging from a,
Yeah,
if you want to
it
call it a
is.
work-life balance, which I don't know if that exists or not, but
Yeah, we try.
it's just, I mean, it does happen, no? Anyway,
Yeah.
Suresh, I want to thank you. So what's next? What are the next steps for for the club, for you in the region?
Yeah. Exciting few weeks, I must say. We got the Champions League semi-final against PSG. I'm extremely looking forward to that. It's been 12 years since we've been to the Champions League semi-final. I'm hoping we can get to London
Yeah.
to the finals. That's obviously on the cards. Getting to the top four of the Bundesliga is important to get to Champions League. Happy to hear that the fifth place is also given to
Hmm.
the Champions League. So that news is really good news to hear that. We are now on in fifth place, probably a point or 2 points behind Leipzig. But we'll do anything to secure fourth place. We had a unlucky last minute equalizer from Leverkusen last week. So,
Yeah.
but that's football, and I only can give credit to Leverkusen for a wonderful season.
Hmm.
We have our Asian fan gathering that's happening in the summer, June, July. So we are gathering all our international fan clubs to come to Thailand. So that's where our next fan gathering would be. We'll have our 10th year anniversary of our international office. So
Nice.
my office in Asia, in Singapore, will be our 10th year anniversary. It's also my 10th year anniversary with the club. So
Okay.
it's something for
Congrats.
for to be thank you for us to be proud of. So plenty to look forward to. Our preseason game in Japan, it's happening in July. So yeah, quite a few things to look forward in the next few weeks and months. So please keep a lookout for our team.
You're not going to get bored to this, as we were saying.
Yeah.
Always on, no?
Always on, always switch on.
Anyway, so I want to thank you so much. It's been an awesome conversation. I had high expectations for it, and I must say they over-delivered. So I want to thank you for your time and for all the knowledge you've shared. I don't know if there's any last words, any messages that you want to send with the audience before we wrap up.
Well, I think I've covered almost everything, but just just keep Dortmund in your mind and in your hearts, because that's the club I would love for everyone to look into and be the club of your choice, or maybe not your first club, but at least your second club in your hearts.
You know what? I'm going to tell you a personal story. When we were little, my little brother and I, we used to play video games a lot, and of course, all these FIFA, they were must. Yeah. And he always chose Borussia Dortmund to develop his career.
Yeah. Oh wow!
And since then, we were kind of like, and we actually worked together because I helped him build a team. I recommended players for him, and since then, we have this special bond where we actually talk about the results of the club, how the club is going. You know, it's kind of like went beyond the video game, and it's actually created a strong connection. So
wow,
definitely, you guys are always on our minds. I must say that. Anyway, Suresh, thank you so much. Yeah. Have an awesome day.
Perfect.
And we'll meet you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
And there you have him, Dr. Suresh Letchmanan. That was a very fun conversation, wasn't it? I just learned so much from him. Let's see if I can just summarize what we spoke about. First of all, the importance of, the international strategy. At the end of the day, being a successful club or a league or whatever sports property that you are, you have to be close to the fans. Being close, not only the fans, but the entire ecosystem, as you were saying, close to your partners, to your fans, to everybody that has some form of relationship with the club. So it's really important that you understand, first of all, which markets you want to go to. But second, how are you going to adapt your strategy to the local customs? At the end of the day, that's what really matters. No, it's not about implementing an overall strategy into all markets. It's just how are you adapting to each individual one. No, in that sense, leveraging on the values, on understanding really what your brand is and what your brand is not. Right, is really key. So we were discussing about how the importance of, in their case, the players. So players like Marco Reus, like Hummels. They represent the values of the club. Authenticity, humility. At the end of the day, how are you leveraging those players or those figures? Because it could be a coach, it could be someone else, from the club. But how are you using that to actually tap into the fans, right? In that sense, it's interesting to see the dynamics of women's football, of the role that youth players can actually have in creating fans in different parts of the world. So how are you using these trends to actually into your fan engagement strategies? I hope you think about that as well. No, I really like what he said about competing with other either clubs or other forms of entertainment. They don't compete; they have their own race. They're focusing on just engaging with their fans, being present, and that's what for them really is, let's say, defining success, right? And finally, what he said about, the career advice, it's so true. You have to be driven, you have to be resilient, you have to be multi-skilled, but at the end of the day, you have to be very passionate for what you do, meaning that, you're going to have to work hard, you're going to have to work long hours, you're going to have to work long weekends. That exists. I mean, it's just a continuum. But hey, if you're up for the challenge, it's a very rewarding industry to be part of, no? Anyway, I don't know if there's anything else that stood out to you. If so, make sure you reach out on social media and, share with us whatever comes to mind. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.